I mean, you just have to see what's going on in Gaza. They're killing children, destroying all of the civilian facilities, the hospitals, the schools. 1.7 million Palestinians living in Gaza have been made homeless, completely displaced. And the idea of saying, so what's there for them to come back to? How are they going to live? What are they going to do? No water, no bread, no schools, no hospitals, no facilities. This is the plan, ultimately.
The Israelis bombed the most crowded refugee camp in Gaza twice. They leveled an entire neighborhood called Block 6. People were digging their children out of the rubble with their bare hands after this bombing.
I've seen the footage, and it is horrific. But there is lots and lots of footage of children and babies being pulled out of rubble in Gaza. And it's gruesome. It's terrible.
These are the deaths of children in conflict zones. And it's children killed per day. The Iraq War, it was 0.6. Ukraine is 0.7. Yemen, 1.5. Afghanistan, 2. Syria, 3. Gaza, 136 children killed per day.
The scale of the atrocities committed here outpace any that we've seen in modern history, and the level of evil and butchery. With our backing, with our bombs, with our support by our client state, not a soul could deny that now. History will judge with horror those with power who enabled these crimes against humanity. Historians will write that this was when the U.S. discarded its last tattered thread of credibility.
Nations are seeing us take part in this deliberate, systematic, organized murder of civilians in a kill box. I mean, these people in Gaza are unable to escape, and they are just being bombed every day with bombs supplied by the United States. Israel has used 22,000 bombs to kill Gazans that were provided to it by the U.S.
The plan has always been, it's why the settlement operations are so important to their strategy. To break up geographically, break these communities up, separate them, and disrupt the ability of the Palestinians to continue to coalesce a national identity. But when you are engaged in a conflict for going on a century now, and people suffer together to the degree that the Palestinians have, you're creating a collective identity that is going to be as hard as iron.
Israel has been keeping, in the Gaza Strip, it's now like 2.4 million people, most of which are children, in a big ghetto, unable to leave. It's hard to imagine how severe the conditions in Gaza are if you've never been there. It's like nothing I've ever seen.
It's so criminal what's happening. I don't even have words for it. There's only so much you can say. And I find it so crazy that despite the nearly 24/7 coverage that we see in the mainstream media about Israel and Gaza, there's never any criticism about the fact that our Western states are funding this genocide. There's never any criticism about that.
But what I would like to at least see is some kind of understanding on the part of the public that is interested in what the United States does and how it does it. These things were wrong, and they continue to be wrong. So maybe there will be a learning curve, but I would love to think that actually the United States, the country I love, the people I love, will learn from their mistakes.
Like anybody with a heart, I spend my life teetering on the verge of tears, because you can't possibly put yourself in that position, in their position, those mothers and fathers, those children, being bombarded by F-16s day and night, week after week after week. One cannot even begin to imagine what it must be like, and that it's being cheered on by the most powerful empire in the world. What is wrong with these people? How can they possibly be doing that? How can they still be trying to cast the Israelis as victims?
It affects you differently when you're a parent. When you see men not able to shelter their children, you don't know what it's like until you have a kid to feel that responsibility. Something I know all parents in Gaza go through under bombing is where should the children sleep? And they often tell them to sleep in different corners of different rooms so that some might survive if the bomb only detonates one part of the home.
It's American bombs that are slaughtering innocent Palestinian people. 40% of those killed are children, 30% are women. It's American bombs wiping out the place under the BS line, we're doing this to get Hamas. No, you're doing it to steal more land.
70 to 80% of the population of the Gaza Strip are refugees from the Israeli ethnic cleansing campaign of 1948, and of course their children and grandchildren. They are there because they're born with the wrong religion, and so they don't have the right to live in property that they rightfully own, and that their grandparents, many of whom are still alive, still have deeds and still have keys. These are a bunch of civilians who are locked in prison, not for committing crimes, but simply for being born with the wrong religion.
When I think of Western values that actually mean something to me, I think life, liberty, property. I look at the Israeli government and I unfortunately don't really see that. I don't know if you get to call yourself a democracy while simultaneously trying to artificially control the demographics of your country in order to favor one specific racial and religious group over another. I can't look at what Israel is doing with no end in sight to millions of people and say, yes, this is a moral, just government.
And what they are is an apartheid state, where you have 5+ million people who live with no rights since 1967. The IDF soldiers will run up, point a gun in your face, tell your grandmother to get on the ground. They arrest people. They have no due process whatsoever. I'm talking about even in the peace times, not when they're on bombing campaigns. I'm just saying just everyday life is that you have absolutely no rights. You have no freedom to travel. You have no freedom to move within your own territory. You have no due process guaranteed to you. You can be locked up and they can just say, your kid threw a rock at me. Did he? Or did he not? Who knows? But they can just say that and lock up a child. That's just unacceptable.
Palestinians were driven from their homes, and not just homes in the sense of homeland, from their houses, from their land. And a lot of times people have pointed out the refugees or their children still carry keys to those homes. This was my father's home or my grandfather's home.
You know, what Israel is doing right now is slaughtering people in Gaza. Israel has displaced more than 2 million people. The idea is very clear if you watch day to day and listen carefully to the Israeli politicians. They want to ethnically cleanse Gaza. They want the Palestinians out.
They're not just killing Hamas, they're killing everybody. They're killing children, thousands of them. They're killing old women. They're slaughtering Palestinians under the guise of fighting Hamas. They're committing a genocide. What's the end game for Israel? To wipe out the Palestinians and take over that land. That's the end game. That's why they funded Hamas, so they could use Hamas as a pretext to do exactly what they're doing.
A member of his cabinet and his defense minister has said it is the plan of the Israelis, you know this phrase, from the river to the sea. That is their plan, and this is their moment. And they are willing to kill innocent human beings in order to achieve it. We'll see how far this goes.
Even if they peacefully tried to go to the walls of the Gaza Strip, they were shot by Israeli soldiers. And so this was, a serious occupation that they were suffering. And that's really important context. Even if you want to ignore that, if you look at what happened since October 7th, there's clearly war crimes and genocide going on here.
And the Israelis, yes, have a right to defend themselves, but to defend yourself doesn't mean you get to go kill, thousands of kids. Mm-hmm. And again, the people on planet Earth who should be the most receptive to that, or at least see the logic of it, are American evangelicals who are rabidly pro-life. But yet, they're some of the most vociferous. Israel can do whatever it wants. Wipe them out, as far as I'm concerned. Israel's got to take the gloves off. And it's just, whoa.
And if you look at what the Israelis have been doing, they are basically bent on destroying a substantial portion of the Palestinian population. They've killed huge numbers of Palestinians, huge numbers of women and children. Roughly 80 to 90% of the Palestinian population is displaced at this point in time. And when you marry that with what they say they intend to do, it's hard to avoid the conclusion that they are bent on genocide.
So the bottom line is the situation in the region is explosive. And what has happened in Gaza is not going to go away. This has left a permanent mark on the people of the region. After all, they were told that they too are animals that deserve the worst, that they too deserve to be exterminated.
And these numbers are considered a low estimate. About 85% of Gaza's population has been displaced, and about 1/4 are facing famine-like conditions. So as the Israeli operations continue through into 2024, many more Palestinians are expected to die from starvation and disease caused by the siege. Public health experts are warning and estimating that if things don't change, nearly 500,000 Palestinians will die within a year.
The plan seems to be carpet bomb them, make them so miserable, teach them a lesson. That seems to be what the whole point of these bombings and these killings. The problem with that strategy is that people in Palestine are already living in a prison. They're on death row. There's no hope for them. They can't get out. They are trapped. They're already living in the worst possible human conditions.
Israel coined this satanic phrase, we're going to mow the grass in Gaza. And that lawn has 2.3 million blades of grass. 1/2 are children, and everybody smiles. I wonder if you would smile knowing that among those blades of grass are the heads and skulls of your children.
I have seen multiple videos of children being injured, children dying, and there's no way you can tell me you can't watch those videos and feel some type of way. Because these kids didn't sign up for this.
This seems to be way out of proportion to war going on, innocents die, and children get in the crossfire. But this number is so high, a strategy that is sickening.
It's actually high-level generals in the Israeli military have articulated their strategy of mowing the lawn, an actual policy of the military to every once in a while just go clean out a couple thousand Palestinian bodies from the territory because they're basically in a war of demographic. They have to keep cutting down grass. That's a stated policy of the Israeli military.
And then, of course, their actions are very indicative of the fact that they have no regard for civilian life. They tell people to migrate to the south while they bomb the south. They're bombing hospitals, ambulances, schools, mosques, churches, etc. And anybody that can sit by watching this happen without feeling extreme nausea and shame in the fact that the United States is funding this unbelievable conquest of a civilian population is just beyond me.
You know, I was in Sarajevo during the war. Well, that was 4 to 5 dead a day. I still have nightmares about it almost 3 decades later. That's nothing compared to Gaza. We're losing hundreds. I mean, they estimate up to 100 children alone a day. So I think for those of us who actually been in a siege, we're more cognizant of the carpet bombing, the indiscriminate leveling, which is, of course, the plan.
In terms of proportion, unlike anything we have seen, it's just a killing machine of children. And so many of them are dying the worst possible deaths because they're asleep and their building gets hit by a bomb by Israel, and they are all crushed to death.
I'm listening to Guterres at the United Nations, and he is telling statistic after statistic about what's going on in Gaza. The most poignant story he told was about his own staff. His own staff in Gaza now are taking their children and their family with them to work in Gaza because they all want to die together.
Israel came with a policy, and it's based on the principle of deterrence. It's called the Dahiwa policy. It's mowing the grass. And what it means is that Israel will respond with disproportional violence, not just against the fighters, but the civilians. They will inflict overwhelming casualties. It's a war crime. It's a literal war crime. Israel has published this. They bragged about it. What happened in Gaza and what's been happening is part of this policy of dahewa, mowing the grass. And mowing the grass literally implies killing the children, decimating them. Look, Israel published it. Google it. The papers are there. I'm not making it up. And when you read it, you're going to go, how could this be? We have been blind to the crimes committed by Israel against the Palestinians for over 7 decades.
And the United States, with its unconditional support, unwavering support of Israel, and it does so in a way that completely undermines any of its claims to being a beacon of freedom in the world.